So, I took the last few minutes while I was watching through the other videos that I posted to finish up on the shading on some of these hands. Yeah, I don't know, they're weird. But for the most part, they do what I want them to do, and now that I'm satisfied with that, and that's the other part of art is don't be a perfectionist unless you have to. If you're doing a painting that's of one of your friends and, you know, you want to generally get their facial features correct, and this is why I don't do commissions for portraits of my friends. But in general, if you're doing something that's more gestural or just in, you know, something like this that's just fun, don't beat yourself up too much about it. Because in the end, like, I could spend another 6 hours working on this, but I don't know that it would get closer to the kind of feel that I want. And for certain projects that's true, and for certain other ones it isn't. But once you're really happy with a piece, take it as it is and enjoy it. And if you're not happy with a piece, sometimes the best advice that I can give is to just, like, leave it overnight and then come back to it in the morning with a set of fresh eyes. This would happen to me all the time in college. I'd be working in the studio until like 10 or 11 p.m., and I'd be really upset with the work that I was doing, and I wouldn't like the way whatever face I was painting looked, especially when it was my face. My teacher was very clever in that the first portrait project we had to paint ourselves, because she knew that we would be like way overly critical if we were painting someone else, but that in general, we would be less critical of our own faces. Maybe she knew we were all self-loathing. But the other thing is, like, there was no pressure because we didn't have to give these paintings to anyone. They were just our first instance of learning the facial structure and the shadows in the face. And that's maybe a video I'll do later when I feel more comfortable with my skills with that. But for the moment, this is what we got. So now what I want to do is, like everything else, I would like to add avocado to it, just because why not? And the first step, just like the first video, is to literally just draw the shape of an avocado everywhere I want and then go in and shape them. So, I'm trying to think. This is like really hard too when you're painting, is you never want to go over something you did, especially if you really like it, but sometimes you have to. So I'm gonna use this. This is like a darker gray green, and it's just gonna be a good contrast to these like really neon hands. It's just gonna be like really realistically colored avocados. So, and this would have been great if I had bought avocados earlier to see the size, but I think something like this is probably fine. Just gonna draw one here. I think that's roughly right. And then, let's see. I don't know if avocados have stems. I've never seen one with a stem, but we're gonna take artistic license. Just draw one in here. It's interesting. Avocados are also called alligator pears, or they used to be, which makes sense, but now I can only see pears and I can't unsee them. But I swear to God, these are going to be avocados. And we're going to draw one here. So this one I would actually consider a mistake on my part, to draw this hand green, especially with the avocado being so like close to the shape here, like of the finger, because it's going to be really hard to differentiate this like line from the rest of the hand. And it's also difficult because it's going to cover up most of the fingers here, which I think were like the really good parts of that hand. But you know, art is art. You gotta roll with the punches. So let's see. Where do I want to put in other ones? Sometimes you just gotta like go for it. As I said, I don't know how Bob Ross did this so easily. Just all the time. Just like never dropped his easel. I don't even have an easel. It's just a chair. I have one coming over here. And see what I mean by just practicing a shape enough? Like, I'm confident enough in this weird avocado shape, because I paint a lot of avocados, that I don't need to be so nervous about drawing each and every individual shape. As long as it's roughly right, I can come back and fix it later if it's not. But it should be pretty good. So another important art lesson is composition. So the composition of a piece of artwork is just how it's composed, literally. So what pieces go into it, how is it put together, what things look good. So in this instance, what I'm trying to do, where I'm trying to figure, because it might seem haphazard, where these avocados are being put in, it's really just like, where is their dead space? And every painting, for the most part, that is representational, and by that I mean it has objects that represent like physical, real objects, rather than something abstract that's just like a color or a Jackson Pollock splatter painting. But every painting that's representational, it's trying to draw your eyes to certain areas. So the way I do that in my paintings is by color or by shape and movement. And also just psychologically, when you see a hand pointing somewhere, you're going to look at the thing that's pointing at. And so for this, it's like, if you see this hand first because of the color, it's going to point up to this one. And then you're like, oh, what's this? Well, this is now pointing downwards. And then, you're like, oh my god, there's a blue hand. And there's just like a lot going on. And successful painting, although I have an issue with the term successful painting or successful art, but successful in terms of making someone look at something, you really want to get into the psychology of like how people view things. And in this instance, I want to make sure it's balanced so that it's really pleasing to the eye. For other pieces of art, you don't want them to be pleasing. You want them to challenge your viewer. But in this instance, this is just like fun. So I'm just trying to fill the dead space. So maybe I'll draw in another avocado here, and I'll draw it upside down just to balance out this avocado that's right side up. And now it seems like there's pretty much avocados everywhere. I'll put something in the corner here, and then one right here, just to break something up visually. Cool. Yeah, so I'm pretty satisfied with that. So the next step is literally just to like shade them all in. And so these are the best oil pastels I've ever come across. And I should have mentioned this in the first video I posted, which is that a lot of oil pastels you're not going to get this kind of creamy behavior because they're more waxy than creamy. But these are Sennelier pastels. So Pablo Picasso originally, Picasso was an oil painter, but he wanted a medium that would be able to draw on anything and didn't require a lot of setup, kind of like me, just kind of lazy, and I like drawing in cafes, and I don't want to set up an easel and all sorts of stuff every time I draw. I just want to be able to like get at it. So he commissioned Sennelier, which is a painting supply company in France, to make oil pastels that were really high quality. So the result is these crayons that basically act more like lipstick than they act like crayons. If you try to do this painting or drawing with Crayola, you would never be able to. It's just the pigment isn't opaque, and so you end up with just like really muddy colors on a black background. And because I mostly use black backgrounds instead of white ones, I've always found these oil pastels to be particularly useful. Even with oil painting, like you have to use each paint has a different level of transparency, and if you want to get into oil painting, you basically have to learn like the different pigments, and there's zinc white and titanium white, and they're different, and one is transparent and one is opaque, and you can use them in different instances, and they're good for different things. And in a limited sense, that's true with these two. One of these like turquoise colors is actually really transparent, and so when I try to use it on here, like it won't show up at all. So that's like another really important lesson, is to know the materials you're working with, because if you don't, then you're you're not going to be able to get the product that you want. Yeah, it's kind of like when I was struggling with paintings in college, my teacher would say, are you using the right brush for the work that you're doing? And by that she meant I would sometimes be trying to do these really fine, minute details with thick, like large brushes, or not like that big, but just the paintbrush wasn't the right size to get the effect that I wanted. And honestly, that can really ruin a painting. And it's the same with like colors, it's the same with shapes, and it's really just knowing the effect that you want to have. And yet again, like I've been saying with everything else, it's practice. You're not going to know these things on the first try. But what's really important to know is that if something isn't working out, it's probably not you being bad at art, it's probably you not knowing the material super well, or not using the right brush. And it's important that if you don't have someone there next to you to tell you, hey, are you using the right brush, ask yourself that question. So I'm not gonna spend too much more time like coloring in the other ones for this video, but I do want to show just like how I would shade in one of these. So I'll shade in this one. The important thing is that in addition to just having the avocado on front, you can still kind of see through the blue, and I'll fix that later in another few minutes. But when I put something on front of my hand, that's going to change the shadows and change the way that the hand is interacting with it. And that's important in painting, is that in order to make it look like the objects you're interacting with are actually interacting with each other, it's important to make sure you change the colors so it looks like there's shadows where there should be shadows. So in this instance, I'm just going to darken the area surrounding it. And it's also important to have contrast around the edges of things in general. So even if I'm drawing something where there wouldn't be a shadow in normal life there, it's important to like be able to bring the line out to make the avocado pop. And this is kind of what I did in a previous video, where I drew like a red outline to something. In real life, there isn't a red outline on anything. But in painting, it's really useful to like bring that contrast. Trying to think of painters who do that really successfully. I think Diebenkorn does that successfully, and a few others. I'll look it up and like link in the comments or something. I don't even know how to do that yet. But ultimately, it's just about being able to bring depth into whatever you're drawing. So thank you for watching, and I'll probably post another video where this is more completed. Thanks so much, and see what's next.